Welcome to Authentic Conversations with Ryan James Miller. Join Ryan as he speaks with top business leaders and influencers, and hear how they've mastered the art of authenticity to achieve all that they dreamed of. As you hear from these leaders, seek not only to be inspired by their authenticity, but to strive for and master your own.
All right, well, what up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Authentic Conversations. I find myself repeating so often how excited I am for the conversation I get to have, the guests that I get the opportunity to share in conversation with and learn from. But this one is extra special. And as interesting as this is, I rarely prepare for podcasts ahead of time. I'm rarely having any nervous energy at all. And there is something about the guest on the other end of the podcast right now that has put a little bit of that into me. And that's because I've had the opportunity today to talk with Julie Foucher. And so for anybody that is a connection of mine, a friend of mine, if you exist in the CrossFit community, you absolutely know who Julie is. And we're going to dig into some of that today. She is a multi-time CrossFit Games competitor. She's been on the podium multiple times, but beyond that, she's been a huge advocate for health and well-being in the CrossFit community, serving on the Games staff for a period of time. She also spent the majority of her CrossFit career also in medical residency and has just recently moved beyond that and is a doctor and practicing medicine now herself, which is just unbelievable. She hosts a podcast called Pursuing Health that has had unbelievable guests, not just in the CrossFit community, but really just in the health, fitness, and well-being world. And so with that, Julie, welcome to Authentic Conversations. I'm excited.
Oh, thank you. What an intro. I'm super excited to be here and I love authentic conversation. So what a great podcast.
I feel like that could have kept going too, but I had to just take a breath somewhere.
Yeah.
All right. So I do, we talked just quickly offline and just so to foreshadow a little bit of what's coming. I definitely want to spend a little bit of time in just some highlights for me personally and being able to discuss some of the things that you're working on. But I think more importantly for everybody is just listening to who you are and how you have navigated the life of working at extremely high capacity over the years in multiple roles and even dealing with some significant adversity a couple of different times, but particularly in this last year. So with that, I am interested to hear. So from everything that I can gather, you started CrossFit back in 2009-ish. And by 2010, you were a competitive athlete. And I think that's the first year you made it to the games, right? It was 2010.
Yeah.
And so how, right into that. So you already had this passion for and direction to pursue medicine, to become a doctor. And yet you also invested into becoming a professional athlete. And obviously professional athlete in CrossFit in 2010 was a bit different than professional athlete in CrossFit in 2021, but it took a significant amount of commitment. And so where for you do you really feel like that drive, that determination to really deeply invest into things like that started for you?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's funny because my mom used to ask me that question about where do you get sort of your drive or your motivation? And I don't know. I think it's just always come naturally to me where even when I was little, whether it was school or different sports, I always just really threw myself into what I was doing. And I did gymnastics growing up, which I think tends to, I don't know if it is because I had perfectionist tendencies or if that created my perfectionist tendencies, but that was definitely something that's always been true about me, is that I'm always trying to really throw myself into something full speed ahead and constantly improve and be as great as I can be.
Okay. And so maybe not necessarily knowing kind of where that came from, but I mean, that is an inherent characteristic of people. I don't really think that that's something that's taught. And so do you feel like it was something that just completely came naturally to you, or was it something that you had to consistently work at over time to stay invested into two things? And obviously there were other things going on in your life too, but two things that required so much of you, because, people that are pursuing just business ownership or a role like you are in the world of medicine, which takes so much life out of them, or athletics, it takes so much. And people are trying to figure out how they can stay so deeply invested to excel. So how have you been able to do that? Or yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think for me, I was very lucky with the way that both of these things came into my life. So I found CrossFit when I was about halfway done with college, and I was already on my way to applying to med school. So that first summer when I competed in the CrossFit Games, I was taking the MCAT. I had gone to do an internship near Washington, D.C. I was submitting my med school application. So I was well on my way down this path of going to med school. And suddenly this thing called CrossFit came into my life. And, I went to compete the first year. I had no idea what to expect, but I ended up, qualifying and doing well. And that became a big part of my life too. And so then it just became this quest of, can I pursue both of these things simultaneously? They both were extremely important to me. And the first year of med school, that was probably the year when I was doing both, fully. There's been other years where I pulled back on one or the other, but that year was probably one of the hardest years of my life. Definitely one of the hardest years of my life, if not the hardest, just because I was so focused on both of those pursuits and didn't have much balance otherwise. So I would be in school full time during the day, 8 to 5. I would go to the gym for 3 or 4 hours at night. I would go home, do some more homework, sleep, and do it all again. And I really didn't have much other balance. I didn't really have a lot of time for friends or family. And so it almost became a little bit isolating, and almost like I had to be selfish in order to pursue both of those things. But it almost took it to a degree later in life that I realized was maybe not a healthy degree.
Yeah. Okay. What year was that?
That was 2011, 2010,
Okay.
11, or sorry, 11, 12. Was my first year of med school. So 2012 games, which actually, I went through, that was a very difficult year, but I also grew a lot. So I went through a really hard time where I was trying to pursue both of them. I was not happy. I was pretty depressed. I would go to the gym and pull up to the gym and just start crying and be like, turn around and go home. I can't train today. And eventually I went and talked to the counselor, or no, our dean of our med school, who was a psychiatrist, and she suggested I go talk to the school counselors. And so I started working with them and realized I had gone through a lot of stress in my life in the previous year, just with graduating college. I had lost my grandmother, who was sort of the first person in my life who I was really close to that I had lost. My uncle died unexpectedly, transitioning to live in a new city, starting med school, CrossFit, like all these big things that I hadn't fully processed. And so once I was able to process those, and then also ask myself the question of why I was doing both of these things, it really helped me to sort of change my perspective. So, I had been doing both of them because I always knew I wanted to apply to med school. I got in, I went. And then with CrossFit, I had competed the first year, I had done well. So it just seemed like a natural progression to go back and do it again the next year. And I hadn't really stopped to ask myself that question of why I was doing what I was doing. I had for med school because, as part of the process of applying, you write an essay and you really want to think about it before you make this big life decision. But with CrossFit, I never really asked myself, why am I doing this? Why is it important to me? Not just because I'm good at it, but like, why do I want to go through all of the, stress and pain of training every single day for hours and hours and giving up all these other things? And so once I stopped to ask myself that question and really realized that it was something I wanted to do and I could identify with that purpose, it made training fun again. And I enjoyed going to the gym. I started doing well. And then that year, actually, I had my best finish at the CrossFit Games ever in 2012.
It's so incredible that you were pursuing medicine and CrossFit. So all of this world of health and fitness, and yet it was almost doing the opposite for you, right? Like, I mean, you were physically, in one sense, really healthy, in really good shape, but it was destroying you. And I think that that's so hard sometimes for us to see that that's happening. You know, these things that we love, even sometimes we can get so deeply invested into that they end up actually hurting us versus helping us, you know?
Yeah, it's actually, I'm glad you said that because it reminded me, I made a post probably a couple of years ago where I posted a picture of myself competing in 2011, which is right during sort of the peak of that stressful time. And just by the picture, you may think that I was really healthy because I was probably the leanest I've ever been. Like I looked like I was in great shape. I was at the CrossFit Games. But behind that picture was the fact that for probably the first and only time in my life, I was actually having physical symptoms because of the stress I was under. And, you know, I wasn't actually healthy. And so, you know, especially in the times of social media where we see photos, it's like people look like they have it all together. They look like they're healthy or fit. And there's so much more that's going on under the surface. And I think keeping that in mind is really important.
Yeah. No, gosh, that's so true. Okay. So, and we're going to get back into this because I think that this attaches so much to, you know, again, observation of later in life, but along the way, so I jumped into CrossFit in, I don't know, I think it was 2013. So really started paying attention. You were back at the games in 2014, again, finished on the podium, won your region. And so then from what I remember, 2015 was going to be kind of your curtain call, right? You were going to give it everything you had one last time. Then you were going to invest fully into your career, which seemed like a really wise decision and yet a super huge bummer. And the iconic moment that everybody knows to some degree or another involved you blowing out your Achilles in the middle of the regional that you were leading by a good margin, if I remember correctly, and thinking that your even regionals was over, and you walk back out onto the floor. You're in a walking boot, really not even supposed to be walking, but walking boot. You walk across the floor and proceed to turn around and handstand walk all the way across the floor. And so all in all, I mean, that whole moment was amazing. But I think the thing that was most powerful for me, and this is going to sound really silly, but I remember watching that live with my wife. And it's even kind of bringing back some of the thought, like when you walked out onto the floor after you had hurt yourself, and there just must have been so much disappointment and frustration, like this is it. And now it's really it. You had the most amazing smile on your face. I remember you waving to the crowd, and the crowd was cheering you on. And that is what, to me, I think one of the biggest impacts that you've left on so many people's lives, not the walking on your hands in the boot, but it was your attitude and the what you brought to the community and to the floor. Like, you seem to always have such a positive attitude with your competitors. You seemed so kind all the time. I mean, you were a fierce competitor and wanted to win. And at the same time, you seemed so respectful, and everything I've ever heard anybody say about you publicly has always been in that same vein. And so how were you able, or how have you been able to do your best to maintain that type of attitude, even in the midst of, again, I mean, that was like your legs were literally cut out from underneath you. And so how have you been able to do that and keep that in practice? And I know that, again, that became a challenge too, but how's that been for you?
Oh, well, thank you. That was very nice of you. It was an incredible moment. And I think another one of the most incredible, memorable experiences of my life, because, and I think a big part of that was the CrossFit community, because, you know, we all are in the gym. One of the great things about CrossFit is the community, and how when you go into the gym, it doesn't matter who you are or how much weight you have on the bar, you know, the people around you are going to cheer you on. And if you have a bad day, or if you're trying your last person finishing, or you're trying to get your pull up and you keep failing, like there's going to be people there to cheer you on when you are about to give up on yourself. And I think in that moment when I tore my Achilles and knew that my CrossFit Games career was going to be over in that way, it was obviously devastating at first. But, knowing that the next event was a handstand walk, it was something I could do. And then once I got out there and just, you could feel the entire CrossFit community. And that was such an incredible feeling. I feel so blessed that I got to feel that, because I think so many people feel it on a daily basis in their gym, but I felt like the entire community, in Minneapolis, but also around the world, was there cheering me on, and it was unbelievable. And so I think that was a big reason why it was such a positive experience for me overall. And I think too, one of the things that prepared me for that, how to respond to that, was going back to high school when I was in gymnastics and I broke my foot. And that was in high school, you feel like it's the end of the world. Like, I had never had an injury. I was going to have to sit out an entire season my junior year. It felt like the world was crashing around me. And I remember having an English teacher at that time. We were learning about existentialism, and I just really embodied that and felt like, okay, this is what happened. I don't have control over what happened, but I do have control over my attitude and how I respond to it. And so I tried to just make that season as positive as I could for my teammates and focus on the things that I could control, and coming back to do, track season later and making my senior season the best that it could be. And so I think that helped prepare me for when this adversity happened again. That was, in a weird way, kind of similar with, not having having a foot injury or a lower extremity injury. Or I just was able to kind of internalize that and focus on what I could control and just make the most of it. So yeah, it was incredible. And I do think, it's something I think we all struggle with, just in any adversity, whether it's a small thing like getting stuck in traffic, or whether it's a really big thing like having an injury or a big life event, is just reminding ourselves that to focus on the things we're grateful for, to focus on what we can control, and like processing those emotions and feeling them, and knowing that it's okay to feel sad or frustrated or upset, and just feeling them, and then focusing on the things that we can control and making it a positive experience for ourselves and the people around us.
Which sounds like, it's funny, I coach my clients on the same thing all the time, right? Focus on what you can control and just allow the things that you can't to play themselves out as they are. It sounds so easy until you really have to do it, right?
Right.
As much as we ingrain that into us, it becomes so hard, because especially when we're in heavy pursuit of something we're really passionate about, or, we're used to performing at a high level. It's like, no, I can do more than this. Like I can do better. And it's like, no, you can only control what you can control. And so I think that's so wise.
And it can be so automatic. It's so ingrained in us, especially like a type A personality, that you almost have to remind yourself on like a second by second basis sometimes, because you just go back into that mindset of trying to control everything. And, it's something I am always still kind of like struggling with or working on, is that balance between constantly wanting to improve and seek betterment, but also having grace for yourself and not, trying to over control situations.
What you said there at the very end, I think, is such an amazing bit of wisdom that is overlooked. And that is giving grace to yourself, right? I mean, it's easier, I think, a lot of times to give grace to other people, but doing that for ourselves is such an amazing gift, but it becomes something that we're just so opposed to naturally. It's like, we're so hard on ourselves, and we push and push and push, but sometimes we just need to give ourselves a break. And that's so hard to do.
It is. We're our own worst critics most of the time.
So bad. So bad. Okay. So for sake of, I guess, some time, from that moment, you continued to play some roles in the games. I know you went back to regionals a couple of times after that. You went to compete on a team for a season, which was great to see you back out, on the floor, even in that regard. And then you made a big shift, right, away from competitive athlete, and focused again more intensely on your medical pursuits or your medical career. The podcast really got going, and you were just killing it there. And so again, it felt like you were just, the ball was still rolling. It was just efforts were going in a different direction. And then fast forwarding all the way to present day, because I want to make sure that we capture this, or I guess somewhat present day. So things all in all seem to be going fairly well for you, again, from an outside perspective. And then I want to read this verbatim because I feel like this will be helpful to give context. And I'm actually going to link to some of this stuff when we produce this episode. But so then back at the beginning of the year, which obviously, even just in general, 2020 was a horrendous year for everybody in so many ways, right? Pandemic and injustice and politics and so many things happening. CrossFit went to war with itself in many ways. And I know that you stepped aside from being on CrossFit staff because of what was happening there with Glassman. And thank God correction has been made there. And it seems to be moving in an amazing direction. But in January, you posted this, and I think this was just what captured it so amazingly for me. So you posted something that said, how often do you fight living the life you think others expect of you versus living what you know to be true in your own heart? And then the first words of the caption in your post said, I'm a little embarrassed to admit, but the way I portrayed my life to you all, and even to my closest friends and family in the past, made it seem like I was living the ideal life, while deep down I was experiencing a lot of internal struggle. And again, I feel like it was just such an awakening moment for anybody that would have read that. But for you, how do you get yourself to a place where you feel like you can express something like that? Because I mean, obviously what you would share in a series of posts over time, there were some really, really difficult personal situations you were dealing with. But you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of eyes and ears on you. You have set an amazing tone for who you are and your character and your work ethic and your desires as a human being. And then you come out and say, something obviously to the effect of, and then give context to it. But, I haven't been portraying life as it has been. And so what brought you to that internally? And how did you feel like that was the best way to communicate what was happening with you?
Wow, well, there's a lot there. I think I'll back up a little bit and just say that post was, I believe, in January of this year, 2021. And I think for me, like the 6 months prior were just a period. And even since, obviously, there's still been tremendous growth, but the 6 months prior were just a period of tremendous growth for me. So I finished my residency about a year ago at the end of June 2020. And like you had said, and like I had mentioned, my whole life, I had basically been constantly trying to achieve, like doing, whether it was gymnastics in high school, college, getting into med school, CrossFit, residency, board exams, like podcasts, all of these things. My life was just full of constantly chasing like what the next milestone was. And I thought I did a pretty good job of trying to identify with my purpose. Like I mentioned, that 1 year, really trying to slow down and ask myself why I was doing the things I was doing. So I thought I was on an okay track, but for the first time in my life, basically a year ago, I found myself without a next step. Like I thought that I wanted to open a direct primary care practice, but because of COVID and because of some delays, I sort of put that on hold, at least for a few months. I had a good friend who suggested to me, if you open a practice 3 months from now or 6 months from now, it's probably not going to make a big difference in the long run, but that time and the difference that it will make in your life in terms of figuring out what you want to do and who you are and where you want to go, could be priceless. And so I'm glad that I followed that advice, and it turned out that time was really important. And I'm so glad that I took it then, because so often we're just chasing the next thing and what we think we're supposed to be doing, whether it's a job, the next, with medicine, residency, fellowship, career, whether it's, marriage and a dog and children and, the white picket fence, all of those things. Like we constantly are just living life and chasing the next thing. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have a next thing. I knew I wanted to still practice medicine. I wanted to do primary care and prevention and CrossFit. All these things are really important to me, but I didn't know when I was going to start. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. And I just gave myself some space. And it was very uncomfortable at first because I'm a planner and I like to have a plan A and B and C and D. And I was fortunate that I was able to take that time. I was in a position to be able to take a little bit of time to breathe. And it just, it was different than, going on a week vacation where you just have fun and relax and read a few books, and then you jump right back into it. It was like, I finally really got to start sitting with just who I was and where my life was going, and got into doing a lot of meditation, a lot of reading, more kind of like personal development, spiritual type books, and just let myself be. And in that time period, I realized that how some of these patterns had affected me. So it wasn't that I was intentionally trying to misrepresent my life or pretend like I had it all together, but really I was miserable. It was more of, like you said, this awakening of myself, of realizing like, oh my gosh, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? And what are the things in my life that led me to make certain decisions that maybe aren't the decisions that are really true to who I am. They're just who I think the world wants me to be. So one of those being just constantly chasing achievement and having that as a focus. Another one being because I was constantly doing that and I was so focused on all the things I thought I had to be doing, I wasn't really investing in spending time with and surrounding myself with real, like close friendships and people that I knew I could trust, and that I would tell everything to. And so there were several times where I made decisions in my life where I would have benefited a lot from running those decisions by some close friends or my mom and bouncing ideas off of them and helping them kind of talk me through it. And so that became a big focus. I spent a lot of time, just repairing sort of relationships with family and then with friends, and really starting to identify like, who are those people in my life that I want, that I trust their opinion and I know they want the best for me, and they're going to even give me the hard truth, even if I don't want to hear it. They're not just going to tell me what I want to hear. And so that was extremely healing for me. And then looking at social media also, I never thought I was a person who was too wrapped up in social media, because I didn't, I thought, well, I try to post on it. I feel very fortunate that I have this platform that CrossFit has given me, that, I can reach people, and through that and the podcast, I felt this big responsibility to use it for good, but it almost became suffocating at times. And I felt so much pressure to use it for good. And then I would feel, you almost fall into these traps of, well, the algorithms work this way, so you have to at least post every day or every other day. And you find yourself posting about stuff that doesn't really matter, just for the sake of posting. You find yourself getting caught up in all the little addictive tendencies that it has by how many likes and how many comments and who viewed your stories and all these things that don't really matter. And so I kind of woke up to that, and I deleted my social media for a while, or got off of it. I took some time for myself. I spent some time, actually one of the best experiences I've had, going and fasting for 5 days and doing like a silent retreat by myself, which was just amazing for getting all of the clutter out of my head. Like there's so many, even just being able to send a text message or an email or look something up on your phone, you don't realize how much stimulation that has. And so fasting and also getting away from all technology and communication, it just really helped to clear my head, and helped me to really get down to like the truth of who I am and what like hard decisions I needed to make in order so that I could be living the life that really aligned with who I am and who I wanted to be. And so through all of that, I made a lot of realizations, and just realized, even though I hadn't probably consciously realized it at the time, that I had been sort of portraying this life of being like, okay, everything's great and things look good, but internally there was a lot of struggle that I don't think I was even really aware of myself, that I started to become aware of, and then started to heal. And I think that, social media, everybody portrays their best self and their best life, and everybody is dealing with something. And I think it's important just to be real about it. And so that's what I was trying to share in that post.
Okay. There's a couple of things that I want to reach back into that you said. So I think that last one is extremely helpful, just in the sense that, it sounds amazing to want to be ourselves. And it is one of the scariest things. I don't care whether you have 7 people following you or 500,000 people following you. You know, it's to be vulnerable, which again, I think demonstrated the impact that this had on your life. You know, the vulnerability and the willingness to put yourself out there and be honest about your own personal shortcomings or struggles or whatever. Again, particularly, there's a lot more weight and impact when it's you versus, you know, a 7 person with 7 followers, but like, that's so powerful. And yet it's so hard to do.
It is. And I think at the end of the day, like, one thing I realized too is what we all just want is to be like loved and accepted. And so for part of it, for me, a lot of it first was like learning to love myself more because, like you said, we're our own harshest critics. And so that was a big part of it. And then finding that inner circle of people, like my friends and family who I know are going to love me for me no matter what. And once you have that, you know, it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks. And so I think that is also what helped me to be more vulnerable in those posts, is just knowing that, you know, I post them to hopefully be able to help someone else who's going through a similar situation, or maybe you know, inspire somebody to step back and think about their own life. And if there's things that they wanted to address, or sort of change or think about, but at the end of the day, like what anybody else thinks doesn't really affect sort of how I feel about myself or how my close friends and family feel.
Well, and actually you hit on both of the things that, you know, that really stood out to me. And, you know, the first one being, if I don't do the work to understand myself and then love myself, again, we know we have flaws. We want to grow. We want to get better. We want to improve. But if we don't love that person, it is impossible for us to even find the right people to be connected to, never mind actually have those healthy relationships. So I love that you said that, and that first. And then 2, you know, finding that close community of people that is there to love you, care for you, support you, protect you, shelter you, you know, lift you up. It's just so important. And again, I just think that those are things that mentally they seem like, oh yeah, that's so obvious, but the practicality in putting that into regular practice is so challenging to do, especially when something you said earlier, which I thought was so powerful, was you talked about the fact that you were doing all this stuff for good, and you were using the opportunities that God was giving you to exercise good on the platform, and yet it was suffocating you, right? And so it's like, you can have great intentions and be doing good things, and it can still be so destructive if you don't have that good perception of yourself, and then have those people around you that are willing to be really honest in the good and the bad with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So, you know, you can have continued on this journey over the last now, obviously, you know, year and a half of this self-work, kind of rediscovering who you are to some degree. It seems like it's kind of funny because I, you know, following you on social media, something that stood out to me, you know, not everything pops up all the time, but there was a post you just had, I don't know, it was a couple of days ago, and it looks like you were out at the lake or something. And you have this unbelievable smile on your face. And I mean, I'm sure it was intentional in sharing that picture that way, but again, it brought me back to you standing on the floor at regionals in the face of adversity. And it seems as though you finding yourself has really brought this whole new light to who you are and what you're all about.
It has. And thank you for recognizing that and saying that, because I think that's been one of the coolest things for me, is just other people seeing it. Like when I see people I haven't seen in a long time, they recognize it. They're like, wow, your smile's brighter. You feel lighter. You just seem really happy. And it's true. I feel it. And when other people recognize it, it just kind of validates even more. And it's not to say that it hasn't been hard. Like I still have extremely hard days, but I just embrace it and realize that, like, making the decision to go through the hard things and embrace it and feel it also allows you to, live authentically as yourself and then experience this incredible joy that I never was experiencing before, because there was part of me that just wasn't aligned. And so that post is funny too, because I still don't have I'm still kind of tiptoeing about social media. Like I probably post every couple of weeks, and I'm just trying to be very intentional about how I use it and not let it have a negative impact on me. But this past weekend, I was in Michigan with my family for 4th of July, Northern Michigan, which is where I just spent all my time as a kid. And it just has that like special place, sort of like my happy place that I go to in my head. And so it was just so amazing to be there. And I was so happy. And in that picture also, I'm super, it's weird for me to think about even posting. I was wearing a bathing suit and a life jacket. I had just been on the jet ski, and even the idea of posting a picture of myself in a bathing suit, I don't love, but I love that picture because of the smile. So I'm glad that you said that. That's the reason why I posted it.
Yeah. I mean, it just, again, following a journey, anybody's journey, we can all track with the highs and lows of life. And I think that some of the greatest opportunities are to be there with each other in the valley of the shadow of death and walking through that together in the way that we're bound together. But then also there is something about seeing stories of redemption. And, as somebody personally that has God at the center of my entire life and really understanding what redemption is, and knowing that while there is one final story of redemption, there are all these moments for God to redeem our lives in sometimes massive ways and other times just little microscopic ones. I just think that was a picture of it. Was like, gosh, like I don't know you at all other than what, we just see on social media or on TV or whatever, but it just feels like redemption. And gosh, does that feel so good to watch somebody else bear themselves and come to the place that you, again, you still want to grow and go and do, but you just feel like you're yourself. And I don't understand how we could really ever want anything other than that.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I've felt that too. I would just say through this process, I've previously been in my life a religious person, but I would say in the last year since going through this process, I've just come to develop a personal relationship with God in an incredible way. And it is like you said, once you have that and you understand, again, it's sort of this like giving up of control or understanding how God is working in your life. It makes it so much, you can have so much more faith through those moments that don't make sense or those moments that are hard, and just know that this is just God shaping you into the person that you are meant to be, and embracing that as a lesson instead of fighting it. And it's amazing to see what happens through, like you said, small moments or big moments. And whether that's, people listening, whether it's you believe in God or it's the universe or your creator or whatever, it's just really, it's really been incredible and in the biggest part of my development over the last year.
I love that you said that, because that was actually what I was going to conclude with and thinking about. That's one thing that, again, it seemed somewhat obvious to me over the years, just in some of the things you've said and the way you've said them, that was a part of your life. But you speaking specifically to how that was something that you invested far more into, and then hearing you say, that impact, I feel like it's something that's so necessary for us, because again, it's so hard to live the life that we do and do the things that we do. And so when we can understand that outside of us, God is for us and he is working through this process with us. I mean, every moment of tragedy, and I've had some horrific tragedy in my life, like everything on the backside of that has been this, again, the story of redemption, like this, beauty from ashes moment. And it just, it seems like, again, for you, that's just been such a big part of the story for you, which is unreal.
Yes, it's incredible. And once you can see it, I think for me, one of the biggest moments in that period, right after I finished residency, one of the first books I read was The Alchemist. And when I read it, I started writing down kind of like all these moments in my life and piecing them together. And through this process, just being able to see all those moments that didn't make sense or that were hard, or that were, I wrote down the moment about my Achilles. Like they really all do tie together, and there was important things I learned from each one that brought me to who I am today. And I know every challenge that I go through from this point forward is also just shaping me. And so it's really incredible when you look at your life that way.
That's good. Okay. I think that we're going to land the plane. And as we do, so what are you hopeful for in this next season of life as you kind of look forward for yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow. Well, already I feel like so many great things have started coming into my life, but I'm just hopeful to continue down this path of like I said, just continuing to become fully the person, the woman that God created me to be, and how that manifests in the world, or the things that I do, or the people that I develop relationships with. I'm really excited and passionate still about health and about CrossFit and about how we can really shape the future of primary care around what's happening in CrossFit gyms. Those are really the centers of where health is created. And if we can make that kind of the center of what primary care should be, I think it's extremely powerful. And, as well, I also do want to eventually have a family. I want to have kids, continue to nurture those relationships with the people who are important to me and spend time with them, and just keep growing in every way.
I love it. I love every bit of that. And we could go, at least I could go hours and hours exploring so much of your passion for health and fitness and the way that those collide in such wonderful ways. And, but I think we'll leave it at that, because I think that what you've shared is, again, just a wonderful example of what I was hoping for. And that's really being authentic and really being able to walk through life as open and honest and transparent as possible, knowing your audience, along the way, and just allowing yourself to be and to become the best version of yourself. And I love that you say, I talk to everybody about being the man and being the woman that God created you to be. And you just said that so well. So I have to say to you, I started it off kind of this way, and, I will continue to say it. You've probably heard this more times than you will ever remember, but you are an absolute inspiration to so many people, including me. I just feel like beyond your athleticism, that's been amazing, and beyond your passion and pursuit of fitness and your podcasting and everything else, you just carry yourself as such an amazing human being in this world. And yes, you have struggles, and yes, you have flaws, but you've just done such a wonderful job of modeling that in a world that needs it so bad. And so from me to you, thank you so much. I'm sure that so many people feel the same way that will listen. So Julie, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Ryan. That is so nice. And I really appreciate it. It means a lot. And I would just, again, give all the credit to God, because, I think we all try to live our lives the best we can and walk the walk. But at the end of the day, it's just, it's not really us.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, guys. Well, that wraps up another episode of Authentic Conversations. As always, feedback is welcome. You can reach out to me. You know how to get me. I'm going to make sure to put quite a few different links into the show notes. You got to see the boot handstand walk if you have not yet. That's an iconic moment for Julie. I'll link that there. I'll link to her Instagram profile. You can follow her, to Pursuing Health, the podcast that she has, and just make sure to pay attention, because, again, her being her and admiring that and striving to live in a similar manner is such an unbelievable way to live your life. But if you're passionate about fitness, you're passionate about health, she is somebody that is making significant strides with primary care, with CrossFit, with innovations in medicine and healthcare overall. And so make sure you give her a follow, connect with her. And until next time, thank you guys so much. Be you, be happy, be authentic.
Thank you for listening to Authentic Conversations with Ryan James Miller. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and share it with others. To connect with Ryan and learn more, visit ryanjamesmiller.com.